It helps a lot. Let me put it that way. It helps a lot, as opposed to this ruminating of thinking, why don't people like me? Why don't they want to be friends? All of that. It's just like, okay, this is what it is. What else can I do here? Who else can I go be friends with? Who else can I offer acceptance and belonging to? As opposed to, standing at the door and knocking and no one is opening. As they say, go find another door or create your own door so you can open it up to other people, right?
Welcome to Hacking Your ADHD. I'm your host, William Kerb, and I have ADHD. On this podcast, I dig into the tools, tactics, and best practices to help you work with your ADHD brain. Hey team, our guest today is Dr. Otito Iwuchukwu, who is here to talk about the emotional and psychological aspects of belonging and how it impacts our day-to-day lives. Dr. Iwuchukwu has a Master of Arts in Organizational Psychology from the College of Psychology and Counseling, a Ph.D. in Pharmaceutical Sciences with a specialization in Drug Metabolism and Pharmacokinetics from Temple University, and is currently an associate professor at Fairleigh Dickinson University. Her scholarly contributions have appeared in a range of peer-reviewed and index publications and have been presented at numerous research meetings and symposia across the world. Additionally, Dr. Iwuchukwu has recently written The Belonging Paradox, a book that presents a new way of understanding belonging as an adaptive journey rather than a static destination. In this episode, we talk about why belonging is a dynamic, ongoing process, not a fixed state, and how we can create a more inclusive environment for ourselves and others. We'll also discuss how masking impacts our sense of belonging, the role boundaries play in maintaining our authenticity, and the importance of giving ourselves and others grace. If you've ever struggled with finding your place, especially in social settings or work environments, you'll find practical tools in this conversation for navigating those tough moments. If you'd like to follow along on the show notes page, you can find that at hackingyyouradhd.com/232. All right, keep on listening to find out how everyone can find belonging. So I was thinking a great place for us to start here was to talk about what belonging means, because I feel like starting with definitions is a great way to get people on the same page. And we definitely want to know what it means to belong and not just be like tolerated or something.
Gotcha. Okay. So, that's interesting because I did have a whole chapter about this just to explain it because I feel like we keep talking about belonging, but I'm not sure that everyone has the same, um, like a concrete understanding of it, like or have a shared understanding. That's the word I'm looking for. And so there's many definitions of belonging as, as many ways to pronounce my name. But the two that I've fixed onto, or the two that make the most sense to me, are those that were kind of defined by social psychologists. And the first definition of belonging or understanding of belonging that I've come to see is that it's like a human need. It's like a motivation. It's something that drives us to um, want to be want to be seen, liked, and included with other people. So you have that relational beingness. You have the sense that when you're with people, they want to be with you, you want to be with them. So that's that idea. And so we all have that need. We all have that inner motivation to fulfill that need. Then there's another definition that talks about this concept of being accepted for who you are. And so, but that's based on, again, the cues, the kind of signals that people put out that lets you know if you are a person who will be accepted in a place just as you are, right? That place is open for you. And so those two, I hold them, hand in hand because the first part, the first definition of belonging is something that, if you think about it, almost like a trait, something that we all have. And we all have different levels of it. So, the same way that some people are, introverted, extroverted, some people like a lot of noise, some people don't. The first type of belonging is, like an inner state. Some people are very satisfied just being by themselves, right? So, they don't have high levels of that belonging need, to satisfy it. While some other people do want, to have it all. Like they want to be able to be included and belong wherever they are. And then the second part, the second type of belonging is the one that we see in our day-to-day interaction. So me talking to you, me going to the grocery store, me talking with, a checkout person at the counter. Those interactions, those mini interactions, right? Sometimes can tell you if at that particular point in time you're in a state of belonging with that person, a state of acceptance and inclusion. So those two kind of go hand in hand. Because if you're a person who has high need for belonging, right? Or you have a higher level of that belonging need, you're going to be looking for cues everywhere, right? To show you that you're accepted or not. And sometimes if you don't see, then it leads to, a lower state level of belonging because you feel like no one really likes me. Right. So those two things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's also like even if you're not having a high level, feeling like you're being excluded never feels good. Um, so yeah, I can definitely see it as something that is very important to like be cognizant of like that. Yeah, yeah, this is something I'm seeking. And because if I'm not, with a lot of times with neurodivergence, we can miss cues and stuff, and that can be both, missing the cues that people don't want you there, or cues that like, oh, these people like me, they want me to stay around.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. So that's sometimes the issue with neurodivergence because you can misread the cues. In as much as we're really good at reading the cues of people in this room, you know, are different, they may not like me, but sometimes we also miss the cues of, hey, you're welcome here. Everyone is welcome here. So yeah. But then it also stands to reason that it's sometimes, not everyone, people who are sometimes, on the neurodivergent scale that have higher needs for belonging, right? They have that higher, um, they have more like, higher levels that they want to meet because it's almost like you keep reading the world around you and saying it's not quite like, people here are not quite like me. So then you have that need to be accepted even more than for who you are than the average person.
Yeah, I was also thinking about this in terms of the like neurodivergent masking and stuff, where we're trying to be the person that we think the other person wants to be, and there's also an interesting aspect here of like, well, if you're not being yourself, who's belonging in that situation? Is it the person you're pretending to be, or is it you?
Yeah. That's the tough question that we all kind of have to answer, right? Like, who is the person in this room right now? Who is the person that needs belonging? If you find out it's our inner self, it's that person that we know we are. But sometimes, in order to satisfy that need, then we mask, then we adopt. I'll call it adopt, adopt a different persona. So that you can satisfy that need because with that persona now you know that people are going to include you more. They're going to, uh, almost like stretch out their arms in fellowship towards you, right? But at the back of your mind, you also know that I would rather be myself fully as opposed to this person that people, kind of prefer to belong in this space. So it's that tension that I think that many times people on the neurodivergent spectrum have to deal with. And that's what makes it so hard because you're dealing with that, knowing what you know. The other person doesn't know, you're masking and they don't know, but you know that you when you enter into situations or certain spaces that you're not yourself, right? In that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this in terms too of like when I am doing these masking behaviors to belong in certain groups, is that do I actually want to belong in that group, or is it just something that I'm like, like that internal need to be feel like I'm belong, but I'm like, yeah, but I don't really care if those people really like me.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's interesting because I touch on all these things in the book to say the fundamental need, right? Like sometimes we do things just because, it's kind of a check the box. You don't really care. And in that space, if people don't accept, it's like, it doesn't matter. And I'll give an example, right? Maybe you might be familiar with this example. So for those of us who are in um academic spaces or professional space, you have to go to all these meetings, right? I'm a member of the association. I have to attend the meeting, but I don't care. I'm just doing it for the job, right? If I meet a friend there, if I make a friend and I meet and I make a friend there, that becomes an additional benefit, right? I'm not going in there for belonging. I'm going in there because my job requires it of me. I feel it's something I need to do to advance, right? So in those places, my belonging needs, whether they are met or not, it doesn't matter, right? More in the spaces that I value, the places that I place value on, which is, with maybe work situations, with friendships, with your family, those kinds of places that we place more value on are where, if our belonging needs are thwarted, that's kind of where it's more painful, right? In that sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's always funny to think like, yeah, this is something where, yeah, I'm putting in a lot of effort to impress people
Yeah. That we don't really care about.
and I'm doing it in a way where I'm not being myself, so it doesn't even matter, and it's exhausting. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been really trying to unpack a lot of masking behaviors this year, with a number of the conversations I've had, and it's just been, oh, this is mostly a terrible idea. Like, there are absolutely times where it's like, "Oh, yeah, I should," like, if I'm going to a funeral or something, tamp things down, be, getting audited or something, like, yes, I'm gonna be very professional and not wear the Hawaiian shirt to that, but, when I'm doing an interview, I wanna be to show who I am and have these conversations where they're fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a, what's the word? It's almost like sometimes you can't eat your cake and have it, right? That's the way I see it. And so it's always a choice that we have to make. To me, I think the central problem or the central issue at hand to me now is how much of the choices that go against yourself are you making, right? Because every day you kind of have to choose, being that if you think about 25% of the adult population or the world's population is neurodivergent. So you have 75% or, 75 to 80% of people you have to deal with. So you can't escape it. And so the question sometimes is, weighing the consequences, like you said, the funeral thing. You could think about that for other workspaces as well, which is why I say to people, if you've understood yourself, then you want to find the kind of work environments, the kind of, work that really works for you. So you are not spending the majority of your life pushing as opposed to, pulling in good towards yourself. You keep pushing back against, misunderstanding, misjudgment, and all. So it's always a cost benefit analysis. And I think, humans do this all the time. I just think that sometimes people on the neurodivergent spectrum have to do it way much more because you're in the minority, right? In that sense. So
Yeah, it's definitely something where, yeah, there's a lot of situations, although it is then funny to think too, like, how many situations have I been in where I'm masking my behavior and the person I'm meeting is masking their behavior
yeah,
because they're like, the expectation is we're just trying to meet these societal expectations of how we're supposed to be acting. It's like, but like I'm like talking with people, I'm like, oh, everyone in this group has ADHD, and we're all masking because we think this is not a situation where we should be fully out.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, what in those kinds of situations, and I've been in that room before, where I thought to myself, how refreshing, right? In that sense, because, it was a meeting and we kept going back and forth. And then there was a particular lady who kept asking questions. And I think after the third question, she said, she didn't say you have to forgive me. She just kind of explained. She said, I'm a little bit on the spectrum. And so this is how I get kind of learn to take information in. And she wasn't apologizing or anything. It was just so smooth, the way she put out that information. And I thought, and the meeting continued, but to me, I felt like she's giving people here in this room some knowledge, right? Some information that would help just in the general interactions going forward. And I really advocate for that as a person, that in any new space you're in, when you're working with a team, you really want to put out some kind of, I would say feelers, right? To say, hey, I may do this, but it's because of this, right? You may see me behaving this way, but it's because of this. And then you don't apologize for it. You just put out that information and then continue in that sense. Because what happens is, you might have experienced this is you start out, you don't say anything, but then the meeting gets to a point where you get really, animated, excited, and all that. And then the mask drops off because now you know, you're in your element. And then it's like, oh, what's happening? So I think just letting people know ahead of time that you may see this, you may do this, and that's almost like that's what it is. I'm not trying to apologize, for who I am in that sense, because there's nothing wrong with me. But I have to let you know because you're not used to seeing this kinds of behaviors, I think, so
Yeah, and we want to, yeah, definitely also like this idea of doing the feelers because we don't know how people are going to react, and it is, yeah, that's important. Like, yeah, we have this need to feel the belonging, but and so we want to be like, okay, is this going to be safe?
yeah. Yeah. Going to be safe? That is the eternal question that I think we're always asking ourselves, even if you don't ask it, directly. It's always, is this a safe environment, for a person like me? Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like that's nowadays it feels even more important to be like, yeah, there's a lot of places that don't feel safe, so and people that feel not safe. So it's like, what? So yeah, doing the feelers, getting that sense. So what are some other ways that people can start building in that sense of belonging in these groups?
So, I think the first thing is, telling stories. I really think that just being able to tell your story in one way, form or the other, and have people tell theirs, I think it kind of creates common ground. And that's what I meant, the feeling thing or the putting out the feelers is a way of telling your story, right? In a very abbreviated form. So just being able to tell your story and tell it without being bashful about it, right? To say, this is kind of who I am, um, I didn't make myself this way, kind of thing. And then I do think just for us to learn to be, um, it's not judgmental, but just creating an environment where mistakes are allowed to be made because we'll all make mistakes, right? Even interactions, I can't count how many times I've, fumbled, as they say, stuck a foot, in the mouth, right? That kind of thing. And it used to be so much that I'll ruminate, ruminate, ruminate. But then after I started giving myself a lot of grace to say, hey, people make mistakes all the time. And then, people are not really thinking about you in that sense, right? So you can just be yourself in a way. So that's, I think, it's important. And then I just said now that, giving myself grace. So giving grace to ourselves and to other people as well, because what I've come to find out too is once we put in this, labels or put in these things of I'm neurodivergent, you're not, I do think it can create, a chasm where even now the people on the neurodivergent spectrum almost start to, I don't want to use the word discriminate, but you start to treat the other people differently. And it's like, that's not what we want here, right? Yes, we want the label so we can understand ourselves better, but we're not trying to say when there's super camp and then the other people there are not, good people or things like that, right? So I think it's that shared grace just to say, hey, you know, um, I can see why that person is like that, right? Because they're neurotypical, and I know why I behave like this because I'm neurodivergent, right? Because I know I've been in spaces where sometimes think to myself, why can't you all be more creative? Like, why do you have to stick, you know, why do you have to stay along the path of, I would say, non-divergence? But then I realized that's my brain, right? They don't see anything wrong in what they're doing. So I have to be patient, and understanding and mindful of that. So yeah.
Yeah, it's always funny when you're just like, but there's this obvious solution over here. Why are we not looking at this thing? It's right here. Just think a little bit differently.
Took me a while to understand that not everybody thought that way. Oh, like a long while. I mean, I guess almost all of my adult life, because it's just like how are you not seeing this? Like, when, especially when you're in a team and you're trying to walk through things and you're saying, here are some of the obvious, to me at the time, here are some of the obvious challenges that we may see. And it's like, why are you always talking about challenges? I said, no, but it's kind of so obvious to me. And then it turns out that that becomes a challenge and an even bigger challenge. And so it's like, how do I strike this balance without it making it look like I'm being, I'm throwing in challenges or trying to poke things. But sometimes some things are so clear to me, like night and day. And then sometimes I wonder, how are you not seeing this? But that's it, right? It's just the way the brains are wired, I think.
Yeah, and it's important to as you were saying, the labels can kind of give people that sense of people, but it's like our identity is so much more than what that label insists. Like, oh yes, I am ADHD, but I'm also, all these other things, and I'm not going to get along with everyone else that has ADHDs. That's not my in group. My in group is people that like all these other things, and even in those in groups, there's going to be further in groups and stuff.
Yep. There's going to be. And I think that's what sometimes makes people, that's the hard part of people even accepting that they're in groups. I'm like, they're in groups everywhere, right? Like you, you know, the fact that I'm even saying, oh, some people think differently than me, that means if I see someone who thinks like me, I'm going to be almost like automatically affiliated with them because like, who, a relief, somebody who thinks similar to me. But then, like you said, even the ADHD as a, as a syndrome or whatever, is so different. It has so many different facets, right? People don't get it. You just think it's all hyperactivity. Maybe not, right? There are so many aspects of this that people have to come to terms with, which is why I do think that the prevalence is increasing because now they're saying it's not just the typical thing that we know, right? Of a child who can sit still, right?
Yeah, we have a much better understanding that it's like, yeah, this is a spectrum, and it's all of these things, uh, and I think one of the interesting ideas here too is so we do have this idea, like so as was talked about these in groups within groups, and we do have sometimes these times where like I really want to belong to this group, but I'm not, and I'm kind of think that's an interesting idea for us to kind of play with here because there are those times where we're like, yeah, I want to belong with that group, but for whatever reason, it's not meshing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the paradox. I think that, I don't think there's anyone who hasn't gone through that where you have a group that you really want to be in. And I think this starts from, elementary school, the playground. You want to be friends with certain people, and they're like, no, we don't want to be friends with you, right? So it's that concept. And so to me, I do think that part of it is acceptance, right? Acceptance. Like you can't force it. You cannot make people like you. You cannot make people, want to be friends with you. So just accepting that this is the way the situation is. And then if it's a large in group, recognize that you can still be friends or acquaintances or you be in relationship with one or two people in that in group, right? You may not be in the full in group, but you can still, belong to the extent that you would want to with one or two people, right? Because belonging is personal, it's also collective. So I can, shout to you and you and I will be friends, but it may not mean that I'll be friends with your larger group of friends, right? So just understanding that I would say paradox becomes uh it helps a lot. Let me put it that way. It helps a lot, as opposed to this ruminating of thinking, why don't people like me? Why don't they want to be friends? All of that. It's just like, okay, this is what it is. What else can I do here? Who else can I go be friends with? Who else can I offer acceptance and belonging to? As opposed to, standing at the door and knocking and no one is opening. As they say, go find another door or create your own door so you can open it up to other people, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm also thinking the opposite side of things too, where yeah, you're have someone that's trying to build that foundation with you, and you're like,
Exactly.
I don't think like you do. I don't know. How do I give you the message that you should go somewhere else?
Yeah. Well, you mean if somebody came to me? Um, so again, I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive about this, but I'm I guess that's one of the symptoms, the directness, the over directness, right? In that sense, because I've been known to tell people, I don't think we'll make good friends. I'll tell you directly. Like I wouldn't try to, I won't try to ignore the situation or move away or, avoid it or escape. I just, hit the nail on the head and just say, I'm not sure we'll make good friends, right? We could be acquaintances or we could be whatever, but I'm not sure we'll make as good a friend because I may not be able to give you what you need, right? So I tell people that. I remember someone asking me to join a group, and I literally said, I generally don't join groups with people I'm at work with, right? Maybe when I leave the organization, then I will, um, be in the group, but I like to keep work at work and then, off work, off work. I don't like to mix those two things. She was extremely surprised because everybody was, joining and, friending. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. So, yeah. Even though, as I said it, I kind of knew there would be a social consequence to this. Like there would be a social consequence where the person might say, "Who do you think you are?" This and that. But I feel like, as an adult, I've been in situations where that has not worked out so well at all, and I'm like, I don't want to be a victim of this in that sense. So let's keep, you know, let's keep the spaces separate for as long as we can, until I leave the particular environment. Then I can come back, circle back, and, we can be friends.
I mean, that I feel that also is really shows that importance of keeping boundaries while still seeking, the belonging. But yeah, because oftentimes I know that's what kind of with the masking is you're often violating your own boundaries to try and find that acceptance.
Yeah. So in my book, I have a framework, and the B is boundaries. That's the B, like just recognizing that you can be friends with everyone. You know what I mean? When I mean friends, I just mean relationship, right? Let's just put it like you cannot be in relationship with everyone and vice versa. So this is not just about you, them to you, as I said earlier. And then also recognizing the spaces where you don't need to waste your time looking for belonging, right? Just being able to recognize that allows you to, you know, um use your finite energy well, right? As opposed to dissipating it, just trying to, be all things to all people.
Yeah, it's well, I mean, yeah, nothing is going to be less satisfying than trying to please everyone because you're never going to do it, and you're just going to
Hmm.
not feel good about yourself later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, I guess, this is actually kind of nicely transitions to another area I want to talk about, which is social media, where people do often try to do that idea of trying to please everyone. Uh, but I think social media is especially interesting when you have these like huge spaces where you have like hundreds of thousands of people. And so you can't belong with all of them, but it's also something where a lot of people try.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting because, with social media, I don't know what has been your experience because it could be overwhelming, right? For a person, sometimes, ADHD, part of the problem is the stimuli. Like if you have too much of it, then it just gets overwhelming. And so social media is a prime example. It's almost like too many voices, a lot of stimulation. Who do I listen to? Where do I, and that's the same way. Like that's the same way you feel. Like if I'm feeling this way, then it impacts you to say, if I put out my voice, who's gonna listen? Right. So you're in this back and forth there. But I also think that one of the, I would say, advantages is this uncanny ability to tease out fluff, right, from the real thing. So very, very well, you just know, that's not true, right? I can see that this needs a little bit of digging into, or, this seems like a conspiracy theory, things like that. So you're a bit more attuned, I would say, to BS than the average person in that sense. And so, social media then becomes what you make of it because too much of it, right? All that dopamine and all, it's not good for anybody, talk less of people on the, neurodivergent spectrum. And so with social media, I always caution, right, to not allow it engulf you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I have not tried to build a social presence beyond just, like, hey, this is what this podcast is, but I'm like, I don't want to live on social media because
Yeah, it is very overwhelming. And I feel like, now they say, oh, people are, like you said, leave on social media. It's almost like because you've been sucked in, right? If you stand and just say, no, I just know if I go down this path, it may not be the greatest for me, then you can, minimize or maximize your time, depending on how you want to look at it. But I always caution because it's a sinkhole for people with distractibility issues. Social media is a sinkhole.
yeah, it's like I spend enough time online. I don't need to make it like this chronic habit of
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
yeah, the chronically online can be not good. Because it's and I imagine that people don't like you don't actually get a sense of belonging in a group when it's that big and spread out.
When is that big aspect? And then what they talk about parasocial relationships. Like it's not real. You know it's not real, but yet your senses are clamoring for this thing. And so I do think it's that dissonance that just gets people because I have a million followers online, but in real life you don't have that many friends. So it's like, how did this happen? So you're always having to put on a show, like you said, continually masking now, right? If we use the term masking to play for the audience. Meanwhile, your real life, right? You haven't optimized it in terms of the relationships and the things that, help you belong. Because it's not just relationship, even things, nature, things like that that help you fully belong to yourself. You haven't optimized it. So, it becomes a very dicey situation. It's either you optimize in real life so you can be a better person online, but then the lure is too much, right? The lure of, the clamoring, the likes and all of that, it's tough for anybody to resist that for too long, right? In that sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I think about often doing content creation is like, am I making content for me at some point, or have I shifted over to making to what I think is going to make the number go up?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
because that number doesn't matter how big it is, I'm always going to want it to go bigger.
yeah, yep. And that's the thing. It's unsatiable. That's the way I'll put it. You always want, you have a million followers, you want 2 million, you want 3 million, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, and then
I
knowing like
know that
the
those are metrics, right? They're not, I think the people who are serious about business and content creation, no, these are just metrics, right? So I'm just using them to get me to the next level in business and not because I think that there are real life relationships that can come out of this to any extent.
yeah, and yeah, knowing that the algorithms there are
Uh-huh.
being gamed all the time in
Yeah.
ways that
All the
are
time. All
not
the time.
not good.
All the time. So yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So and whatever I had this thought and then it disappeared. The classic ADHD podcast. There was something there.
Yeah.
Uh, but oh yeah, this is one thing that I think would that I was reading is that you have this emphasis that belonging is this ongoing journey.
Mhm.
It's not a fixed state, and I think that's a great idea for people to.
Yeah, it's not a fixed state because, if you set it up as that fixed state, if anything then changes, like an equation, right? Like if you think about belonging, you have to think about the environment. So you think about you as a person and you think about the environment. So if you made it like a fixed state, if anything changes in the environment, then it's going to change your person, right? Your sense of belonging as a person. But if you understand that, okay, the environment can change and you understand that, okay, um this belonging need, right? I just need to keep making sure that I'm feeling it in the ways that I know best how to, as opposed to looking to only one source for it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and yeah, we know that like yeah, people change over time. No, nothing lasts, and even though we feel like oh yeah, this is how things are, yeah, things change. Like I've
We change, right? We change. So that's why I mean, that's why I said it's a function of two things, the person and the environment. So I can decide to move out of one environment, which means then I have to now find my belonging in the new environment. So it's almost like this function, right? Like an equation, what do you call it? Like a algebraic thing, where, as things change, you just have to keep making sure that you're satisfying your belonging needs. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, not sacrificing yourself to try and find that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think for me, that's just something I always come back to with ADHD because I know that was my habit was to be not be myself to try and find that belonging, and it sometimes kind of worked, but overall it like is was a bad strategy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing about masking and all that is it will always work. It's just depending on the effort that it takes from you day in, day out. I do think, we use the term masking as though it's a special thing. I think even people who are neurotypical do this all the time. It's called, there's a term for it, like uh what's the word now? Perception. Like, you kind of are always working to keep a particular perception of you. In that sense, what you know as organizational politics. I don't think people who, behave a certain way at work that we know, I'm not sure that's how they are in real life, right? That's why when you see them in other spaces, like that's not the person I know, because we show up differently in different spaces. Like everybody does. But then I think for us, it now has to do with relational interactions. Just the one-on-one in those spaces sometimes become a little bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, definitely don't want to come off with like yeah, masking is something only, but yeah, because we all show up in like we're different people around our friends than we are around our parents. Like and
Yep, different people at work, at home, right? In that sense, yeah. So
um and it's not even like and it's not necessarily even a bad thing. It's just like this is
yeah.
this because we're as via belonging is a ongoing process. I'm an ongoing process myself in all aspects.
It's being situationally aware, right? We talked at the beginning about the cues. I think the question for us is sometimes missing those cues, right? Cues that other people would have readily seen, we may miss it. So that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then just yeah, I guess bring it back to the idea of like yeah, you can be multiple people but still authentically be yourself.
Yourself, yes. Yep. That is to me, that's what do you call it? Uh, the final call, right? Yes, that is it. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're coming up on time here, so I was wondering if there were any final thoughts you wanted to leave the audience with.
Mm-hmm. I think it's this, concept, like if we're talking about my book and I talk about the framework, is that understanding that we're all needed as we are, right? Because I think the world tries to get us to feel like, you know, there's something wrong and like, you know, I'll use an example now. I'm not sure for you with the concept of time and tardiness. That is just such a big issue with people with ADHD and the way people look at it as is a moral, offense, right? In that sense. And I keep thinking to myself, if only you understood that the person on the other side is trying their best, right? They're trying their best to make sure they get there on time, but they lose consciousness of time. So it's nothing about you. It's not a disrespect of your person, because that's how people couch it to say, oh, this is so disrespectful. And they're like, no, no, no. The person on that side is so respectful of you, which is why you're seeing them even showing up, as they are, albeit late, in that sense of the word. So things like that, right? They tend to eat away at your sense of self because it's just like, why can't I be on time? Why can't I be this? Why can't I be that? And so is that understanding of just, giving yourself grace, understanding that your being here is just necessary, right, for the time and space that you're in, and then empathy. To be empathetic towards ourselves and to others. Like I talk about that in group, out group, we talked about that. And so, from that space and recognize that you always be sometimes in that liminal space, right? Sometimes belonging, sometimes not. Just accepting it as part of the things that come to us in this life, one life that we get to live. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if people want to find out more about you, find more about your book, The Belonging Paradox, where should they go?
Okay, so my website. I think I can give the links is otitoiwuchukwu.com and then slash, the Belonging Paradox book. So can join the community. I look at it as a community of people, right, who want to belong, yet sometimes don't belong, but you find your way, anyway. So that's that. I'm also on LinkedIn. And then my Facebook author page is the same, Otito Iwuchukwu _author page.
Awesome. And we'll include links to all of those in the show notes so people can get that easily. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for this great conversation. I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. Thanks again to Dr. Iwuchukwu for coming on the show, and thank you for sticking with us all the way to the end. Before you go, though, let's do a quick rundown of today's top tips. 1. Belonging isn't a fixed state, but an ongoing process that changes with both your internal state and the external environment. Recognizing this can help you manage expectations and frustrations when your sense of belonging fluctuates. 2. Recognize that you don't have to belong to every group, and not all groups are meant for a deep personal connection. Don't force yourself to belong in every situation. If a group environment doesn't feel right, it's okay to step back and try something different. 3. You don't have to be liked by everyone. Instead, it's important for us to focus on finding spaces where we can truly belong. It's about finding authentic connections and not chasing superficial acceptance. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear what you thought of this episode. Feel free to connect with me over at hackingYourADHD.com/contact. If you'd like links or to read this episode's transcript, you can go to the show notes page at hackingYourADHD.com/232. And if you'd like even more Hacking Your ADHD, be sure to sign up for my newsletter, Any and All Distractions, which comes out every other week. In it, I give out my best distractions of the week, be they what I'm reading, what I'm playing, or what I'm watching. I also try to give out a few bits of actionable advice in each newsletter, although your mileage is going to vary there. If that sounds like something you're interested in, head on over to hackingYourADHD.com/newsletter to sign up. And I also wanted to make sure you know about our Patreon. You can easily find that at hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon. It's got a pay what you want model, meaning that you get all the same stuff regardless of what you pay. You can pay $0 or $2 or $10, and it's all the same. The only difference coming from the roles that are assigned on the Hacking Your ADHD Discord. So, if you want either access to the Patreon or the Discord, be sure to go check out hackingYourADHD.com/Patreon to sign up. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/@hackingYourADHD. And finally, if you'd like another way to support the show, the best way to do so is to tell someone about the show, especially if you think a particular episode would resonate with them. Just click the share button on your podcast player. And now for your moment of dad. What do you call cheese that isn't yours? Nacho cheese.